Pump it up, pump it up.
Trae.
Come on, come on.
With Trae.
Pump it up, pump it up.
It's the day with Trae.
This is the day to gain inspiration, to make a positive change in the nation. We're inviting you to partake in conversation to raise your vibration. It's the day that we will all celebrate all of our peace that make this thing elevate. Watch the negative fade away, cause it's the day with Trae.
Grand Rising, everyone. Welcome to the Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. I get to welcome you to what we love to call a terrific Tuesday here on the Day with Trae. I'm really excited for my guest in the building. I have the opportunity to speak with Jeff Dade, who is also a member and an employee with the Homestead Community Land Trust in their Pierce County Community Engagement Division. Really excited because that's like new bodies of work for them. So I'm excited to talk to Jeff all about it. And later on in the show, we got Tye Reed, one of the co-founders of House Our Neighbors, here to tell us more about their social house listening post. I think I got it right. Well, I'm so glad to have y'all join us. Of course, you know, before we get into it, this is where you get to actually participate in our growth. You're going to share this stream, share this show, however you're watching it, with folks who you feel could benefit from the daily dose of dopeness we love to give you here on the Day with Trae. And if you can't watch our TV show, we still have you covered because we can also make sure you listen to us anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Just search Converge Media Network and the Day with Trae. You'll find me on whichever platform is your favorite. Shout out to our podcast team for making that happen. Really appreciate the crisp audio that's coming through for all of you listeners. Well, I'm excited because we get to actually kind of continue a conversation that we started yesterday with Jeff Dade, who's coming up next to tell us a little bit more about his journey into housing and how he's bringing his passion to this amazing body of work that Kathleen helped to share a little bit of light on yesterday, and also to give us some more details about this upcoming event in September with Isabel Wilkerson. Welcome, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm glad to be here, Trae. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And it's also really exciting because I have been connected with Homestead's work for some years and understanding the scope of land trust. We got a good depth of it from Kathleen yesterday, but I'd love to hear your connection to it. What brought you into this body of work?
Absolutely. So for years, I was a banker. That's how I got into the financial realm. And as I did that work, it evolved in different spaces because it was one thing to prove myself in spaces, another thing to be me, being Black in America and figuring out how that works with finance. And actually how we discovered that we are college colleagues, you know, that was part of my journey, was actually going back to school because I saw things in particularly Katrina, where I saw Black folks coming off the ramps, and I was just thinking, how did we get here? And there's certain things that we're taught, but like really, what are the underlying pieces? I wanted to understand more because for so many of us Black Americans, there's, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois talks about the two-ness that we experience. And so I was really, after, 20 plus years in the financial services realm as a banker, business banker, financial therapist, and what have you, I was really interested in community economic development, but I was trying to find, how do I fit in and how do I fit this Black story in? Because these are the folks that I understand, that I grew with, the culture that I'm so in love with, that is so normal for me, but is not normed in the spaces I've been taught and to traverse in my professional realm. And so I didn't know how to articulate it this way at the time, but that was the rub. And so went back to school, and learned about community economic development and a lot of the things that I chafed under. Like, why do I understand us in this way that's so honorable and beautiful, and yet I hear there's this other piece, right? And we'll talk about it, but one of the connections for me was how racism doesn't explain it well enough. There's other things that are happening there, and I want to know, and I didn't feel like I had it, or I didn't have any peers or mentors that were available or that I knew how to approach. Is probably more a better answer to that. But did that, and then right after that, I ended up going into pure financial, I counseling at JBLM. I work with, I'm a military brat. That's how I got to this is our last duty station. We PCS here, and my father retired here. All my extended family's in the DC, Maryland area. Mom's from West Virginia area. But yeah, I've just been here for 30 plus years now. I have my own family and my own work. And now, taking it from corporate banking and financial work for so many decades into community economic development. And the place that has welcomed me and is beloved to me is the Hilltop neighborhood in Tacoma. So I'm not from Hilltop because I'm a military brat. And so I always make sure I say that, because a lot of what I speak and I talk through is talking about Hilltop, and I do that as a proxy and as an adopted son, not as someone who has a Hilltop experience growing up. So I always want to make sure I say this for my Hilltop folks. I want to make sure that you're hearing me do the disclaimer, because I know it's a big deal. But yeah, and so our work now, so I went from that kind of finance, doing, working, helping rich people get richer, which is not inherently bad, but it wasn't enough for me. There's something more. And so it took me a long time, years and years, to figure out what that looked like. And here I am in community economic development.
I gotta say, it's such a great journey. I mean, not only because Jeff and I got history from back in the day at UW Tacoma, but that was the beginning really of urban studies program there. And I remember, you could tell that there was still a sussing out of, what this looks like. And I remember challenging one of my professors at the time around gentrification, the term of it, like the reason for it, as they were kind of promoting it as a necessary piece.
Ooh, ouch.
And I was like, what do you mean? You know what I mean? And having experienced it, I was like, you mean when they push people out? Because my family experienced it in the Central District.
Absolutely.
And so many families experienced it in the Hilltop, close to where UWT is.
Yep.
So the ideas around how urban development and how it coincides with economic development is such a great body of work. And I'm glad that you were able to kind of bring your finance expertise into this work, because it gives you a very unique perspective about how to approach it. Yeah, it's real. But now you're with Homestead. I want to hear a little bit about your role there.
Yeah.
Tell us more how you're bringing that work to Pierce County.
For sure. So it was, I'll give you the short story, but Kathleen and I, who leads Homestead, we kind of dated a little bit, if you will, like professionally. Like we met each other when I was speaking at an engagement in North Bend, of all places, which was a great crowd. But I was with another nonprofit at the time, and it ended up being this really interesting, I'll tell you, maybe this is better. Going through the pandemic, one of the things that occurred to me and that I really focused on, I joke about it because I say some people got, in shape and they did this and this, that. I collected glasses, which I know you can appreciate, and I collected kindred spirits. So I was looking for folks, because one of the things that occurred to me, having gotten into nonprofit and this community economic development piece, but specifically for the purpose of Black well-being, not only is it a slippery slope, just finding out who has juice, who's interested, how do we, just navigating is really, it's hard. It's really hard. And so part of my roadshow, I was always doing this piece where like, okay, this is what I do for my day job. Have you heard of Ikigai? Like where this is my purpose, this is my passion, like where it meets, right? So I would always find places where this is my day job, but how do I insert like this deeper piece and for my people, for myself, and cultural conservation, all the things. And doing that, I ended up meeting Kathleen on accident, and we ended up talking and just being kindred spirits. And then when opportunity came up when I was leaving my former project, which was under duress, it was something that was really promising for Hilltop that didn't work out, and for really bad reasons. Kathleen was a partner then, from being able to help me suss out what some next steps could be, but also and we had to meet more in conclusion this part, helping me, because I had known of Community Land Trust, and ironically, one of the pieces, I ended up being one of the elders for the Community Land Trust. There was sorry, I lost it. There was a response from the community that actually said, we want a Black Empowerment Center, we want a community land trust. Those were, it was like a 3-year longitudinal study that was connected to the Tacoma Urban League, and I got to be part of that. And so being able to connect and actually see like, how might we do this? Because to your point, progress without displacement, gentrification, one of the definitions of it, right? It's heightened in Hilltop, and depending on who you talk to, I think of my friend, my homie Corbett, who made this shirt with Sankofa on it. Was it 15 years ago? Was it 20? Was it 10? Really, it's a progression of there's an intensity that happened, and today we see there's already, if you're from Hilltop, and more than likely, if you're formerly in Hilltop because of the effects of displacement, that there are market rate places where there shouldn't be, where folks that think like us think there should never be market rate places, right? And so that's part of our work, looking at the community land trust model, which was created by Black folks, by the way. So talk about go back and get it. There is this ingenuity that we created. You know what I mean? So there's an amazing synergy that's happening where we're in the work that we're doing with AYA, Community Land Trust, that we're building right now.
Beautiful. I mean, the need for this is so real. And I talked to Kathleen about this a bit yesterday, but it also shows itself in different forms of work, and love this conversation series that they started. And I know you're a huge part of, Isabel Wilkerson, this event coming up. Tell us a bit about your perspective on the need for such an event and to bring her body of work specifically out here to really tie it to what's happening in our area.
For sure. So non-sponsor, you need to see Origin. I just, if you have, so Isabel Wilkerson, I brought it because this is one of my favorite books, and it's kind of a weird thing to say favorite because the things it uncovers are wild, and they're not positive, but they scratch this itch. So Cast, the Origin of Our Discontent. So the movie's called just Origin, right? From that part. And man, it ties in so many ways, and I won't go in because I can talk about it for a long time, and that's not what this time is for. One of the things that she says that I'll quote her, not verbatim, but she talks about racism it not being enough of a articulation of what's happening, and that racism is more like the skin, but caste is the bones, right? And then I heard her talk about class as just on the way here, I was listening to a podcast, class as like the clothes. It's really interesting just how the things work together, and how it's unrecognizable and kind of invisible. And I say kind of because for folks like us, we feel it, like we've grown up in it and we feel it, but it's not described. It's not something that, for our, Black history, what you get if you're lucky these days, right? Because we know about Florida. You get a chapter on civil rights movement. You see Black folks in dogs and hoses, right? And then you get a chapter on slavery. And there is so much more of how I don't know if I have to watch my language here, but how we built America.
Yeah.
And how that is not acknowledged, and how the subhumanity that's been pushed on us. And I didn't have that language even 3 years ago. But that's part of what we're fighting against, is that, but we're not the first ones. And that's part of what Isabel Wilkerson's work does. She talks about how, the Great Migration and how that worked out, but we went from Jim Crow to James Crow, which I didn't even know was a thing, right? Where there's a northern version of Jim Crow that talking about, Black codes versus segregation, all these different things, but the way it's so important because it puts it in a way that's really digestible. It's really, you can really engage it. And she's obviously an intellectual when you really dig into her, but she's saying it in, if you watch the movie, I think you catch why, her cousin's in there and her family and stuff. I'm a fan of Isabel Wilkerson, if you're not catching that.
I love it.
But it gives you this through line, honestly. That's why she's so important. I feel like everyone, every American in particular, needs to know her name. I've not met her She doesn't know what a fan I am, but just as someone who's been a seeker particularly my adult life and in my particular career and what I'm going for, and with Black well-being, it answers so much. And it's not the answer, but it helps us gather these elements that we've known about for generations, right? But to get all the knowledge together and like, oh, that's how it aligns. Okay, that's what's up. So, Kendrick Lamar, They Not Like Us, right? I've been thinking about that now. Mind you, the subject of his song is something different, but the message, right? I feel like if I can use this metaphor, that title and her work, it helps explain why. And I'll give you just the overarching piece connecting Black American situation to the origins of Nazi Germany, to a caste system that is thousands of years old in India, and how that does not feel like a book that should even work. That's just a wild connection. It works.
Wow.
She's such a genius, and she put these things together in ways that we can understand. And so, directly, I'm certain that she'll bring up redlining as well as you have in Seattle, Tacoma, Hilltop is in a redlined area. Yeah. And so we see the vestiges of that. We see what's happening today that goes with it. So that was my short answer.
Well, no, clearly, I got to see this in the last time this conversation series was here, and we talked a little bit about it yesterday. It's so true that there's bodies of work that really help to articulate the nuances that are experienced in how we see these different nodes throughout our own lives, whether it's our lived experience or something that we're witnessing happen. And that is so true that, to be able to have someone like her come and explain that and tie it to the experiences we're having here is so key. So I'm glad that you are on this journey of, building the land trust, working with Homestead, really bringing folks from the Pierce County community to be engaged in that work. And of course, before I let you go, I got to give you time to look right here and make sure folks know how they attend this phenomenal event. Let them know.
Absolutely. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you all are champions for Black well-being. We're out here. There's places for you to join, one of which is if you go to Homestead, clt.org. Maybe it'll be right here or here, something like that. Then you can find out how to join us for our benefit that's going to be featuring the honored Miss Isabel Wilkerson, talking about bringing things home, talking about this overarching piece of what it is to be Black in America and how things work across globally with anti-Blackness, etc. But join us on September 12th. Go to Homestead on our website and you can sign up. Also, if you want to find out more about my work with AYA, Community Land Trust, that's coming up, that will be forthcoming. And if you want to learn about it, you want to be a member of or join up to learn more about us on the web. That's it.
Jeff, thank you so much for being here. So
my
good to
pleasure.
be with you. Anytime you have updates about AYA or our building, just know the Day with Trae is here for you, all right?
Okay, I appreciate you, sis. Thank you.
Wow, y'all. Great way to start this Tuesday. Some amazing information with Jeff. Up next, we got Tye Reed in the building, and we're going to continue a housing discussion with Tye and House Our Neighbors right after this. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. You're watching The Day with Trae.
Here on Back to Vesa, it's always been important to me that we uplift stories from across the region, and that no matter where you live in the nation, you never have to miss a moment of the show as we continue to highlight the beauty, excellence, and resilience of our communities across the Pacific Northwest. Why? Because representation matters. So no matter where you live, be it the Central District or Centralia, Portland or Pullman, or anywhere across the country, I encourage you to join me on this Back to Vesa journey by downloading the free Fox Local app on your phone or smart TV as we continue to elevate the very best in our communities.
Get ready for an unforgettable conversation. Join beloved talk show TV star Sherry Shepherd for a special episode of The Day with Trae. Sherry opens up about her incredible career, the joys of motherhood, and the importance of staying true to yourself. Make sure and tune into this very special episode of The Day with Trae on August 8th at 8:30 p.m. across all Converge media platforms or at whereweconverge.com. Welcome back to The Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. Joining me right now is Tye Reed. What's up, Tye?
Hey, Trae. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a continuation because as you can see, we've been talking about housing. I would love to hear some of your background story and what got you to be the co-founder of House Our Neighbors.
Sweet. I didn't realize that Jeff would be here and talking about Homestead and land trust. So that I think that does tie in really well with housing and social housing. Like you said, I started House Our Neighbors, which, is officially now a C3 organization / a C4. So they do political work as well as education. But before we were just a coalition of organizations. We started really as like anti, right? We're now pro things, but we started out being against Compassion Seattle, which was a charter amendment back in 2021 that basically would have just codified sweeps, right? It was mostly about sweeps. That's like a lot of the work that I do is doing anti-sweeps work and working with homeless folks. But when I teamed up with Tiffany, who was working at Real Change at the time, we really wanted to say no to this because we knew it'd be super devastating. But the next step was obvious, is that we've been wanting to say yes to so many things for so long, right? So the first thing was stopping Compassion Seattle, which we did in court. It was ruled illegal, so it didn't even make it to the ballot. And then immediately, Tiffany and some other volunteers started working on creating the Social Housing Developer Initiative. So in 2023, last year, we had I-135, which was to create the social housing developer. And that was super successful. And we won by like 12 to 14 points or something. And so that created the housing developer. But of course, we need funding. Like for most things, that's not the end of the story. So this year, I'm no longer with House Our Neighbors. I'm just on the C3 board. But they created Initiative 137 to fund the social housing developer through an excess compensation tax. So that's just basically any business that pays somebody $1 million or more, everything after that $1 million will be taxed, I think at 5%. So, we hope to bring in $52 million with that so that we can start funding this like voter mandated social housing that we really need, especially as we see the housing crisis has only worsened, at least since I've been here 9 years ago. So
yeah, no, it really has. And it really seems to be a bit progressive. I think some are really experiencing that. Tell us a little bit more about social housing, because I think, for us to understand it, some folks, there's a lot of kind of chatter out there, but it's really has a futuristic scope that's based on things that have already existed in other areas. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so Tiffany and a different cohort, they've been to Singapore and Vienna to talk about their social housing models, and they've existed for like Vienna for at least 100 years. Mm-hmm. So and that came out of like a socialist uprising, right? So we're kind of coming from a different direction with like a people's initiative. But the idea of social housing isn't to be or compete with low-income housing, right? There is a special place for people who need very low income, 0 to 30%. But social housing is supposed to be our response to the government's lack of plan around housing in general, right? For a long time, housing has been a commodity, right? Just like everything, it can be bought or sold, it can be turned into a luxury, prices can increase arbitrarily, and that isn't what housing should be. For my idea, most things shouldn't be like that, but for sure, housing, food, water, it should not be part of the market, right? Where it can be subject to all of these different forces that drive up the price. And so we've seen that the housing market pushes out not just people who are in the 0 to 38% income, that pushes those people into homelessness. It pushes folks who make 30 to 60, 60 to 80 out of Seattle, right? You're not really likely to be homeless, but you'll never live in Seattle when one bedroom is on average $2,000 right now. And so we're talking about creating a plan for the city to actually start building essentially workforce housing, housing for nurses and teachers and coaches and nonprofit workers, right? Like a lot of these folks will, they won't ever reach the welfare cliff, where you don't make enough to actually get a lot of subsidy, but they'll never be able to, enjoy the private market or the free market. And so social housing is housing that is permanently owned by the government. So no 99-year leases, which I think can be beneficial in the short term, but like things that it's permanently owned by the government. You'll never pay more than 30% of your rent. There will be rental boards. So like the board, for one, the social housing board that like creates all of the social housing in Seattle, they're going to be majority renters. So we don't really have a government structure that has real power that is majority renters or majority working class folks or people who have experienced homelessness. So this is kind of really one of the kind in the country. We've kind of modeled it after what other people have done outside of the country. But this is hopefully, a long-term plan. This is not going to build housing tomorrow, but this is saying that like the government should have a stake in creating workforce housing that isn't just subject to the market or only for folks who are always at that welfare cliff.
Yeah, I'm just such a huge fan of housing work and building our cities with the lived experiences of those within the cities. And it got me to get my degree in urban studies because I wanted to understand from an academic perspective, how do you set things up so that they're better? Because we are talking about, we need new systems. And that's what I'm hearing you say here when it comes to social housing. It's a new way of understanding the system of housing and creating a branch that says, this is what this is for, and this is how we're gonna build it properly. And I love this. And so I'm so glad you're here to talk about it, especially, with the conversation that got started with Jeff. It's perfect, right?
Yeah.
But also too, there's ways that folks need to get involved. So y'all have these social housing listening posts, right? I want to hear a little bit more about this.
So the social housing listening post, and also shout out to UW satellite schools. I graduated from UW-B, and I know you and Jeff are talking about UW-Tacoma. So obviously, like, they produce great folks. Yeah. So the listening posts are going to be really important because, I'm like a communist, right? And so for me, you need social engagement. We can't just pass laws and then people just go home, right? And thankfully people haven't, right? Like people have stayed engaged through creating I-135. They're following what the board does. We're trying to make it super transparent, because House Our Neighbors might have created the initiative and voters passed it, but the board is now independent. They can do whatever they want, but people have to be on them. And so part of the listening post is to kind of dispel people's misunderstandings about what social housing is, educate folks on what social housing is, what the long-term project is, and get feedback on what these places look like. One of my favorite things about social housing, well, for one, the first purchases will be acquisition. We'll buy existing buildings, turn them into social housing long-term like that. But the thing I'm excited for that will happen in 10, 20 years, we'll see, is developing a totally brand new apartment that is from scratch, from community, where we talk about, we want a health center downstairs, we want daycares, we want a little store, we want a courtyard where folks can play, and gardens on the rooftop. Like, that's what I'm excited about, and we need that feedback from folks who are going to live here, right? Like, whether you know about social housing or not, it's law now. Right, and it's going to the polls to get a tax in hopefully November or February, and it's going to be real. And so we want to hear from folks what that looks like. The Social Housing Developer Board needs to hear from people, and people need to be educated on this totally new, like you said, basically from scratch system that folks need to be educated about so that they can fully engage, right, and have their voices heard.
I'm like,
exactly. So we'll see you there, obviously. Trae.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited about this, Tye, because when I tell you, like, that was one of those models that we studied in urban studies and I did multiple like study abroads to learn how cities are built globally. And I'm so grateful to hear this, because over the course of my studies, I learned about zero waste economies and things like that were happening, and understanding what it means to have, a building that houses all of these things. We tried to do some semblance of it here because we did start to see the rise of these multi-use buildings, right? You got apartments, you got retail on the bottom, some have amazing rooftops on top, not all have gardens, but there was like, okay, let's figure out a way to maximize the space in the building. But what went wrong, and what we see here specifically in the kind of Seattle greater metro area, is that we still have a lot of the storefronts in the bottom of these buildings are empty. They're vacant, right? Like the idea is that they are so unaffordable that no business can actually go in there and sustain itself for the course of time. And so because of the kind of ways that we've done it with a capitalistic mindset, when it comes to commercial affordability, it wasn't built into the model. And so having something like this is like a dream to me, because we have the power to now produce spaces that are being utilized 100% by the folks who are in the building. And we also understand like social housing as one, but I go into like, oh my God, there's cooperative models of ownership.
Co-ops.
There's so many different, like we talked about land trust, there's so many different things that we can do with that kind of understanding of let's build the building so that we have spaces that people need. I mean, daycares, health centers. I mean, you're talking and I'm just like,
let's build it today.
Yeah, because I can see it. So of course, these listing posts are exciting because y'all are telling folks, look, we need to hear from you. It needs to be from community voice that we can really push this forward. I give you time so people know how to share their voice with House Our Neighbors and how to get engaged in this phenomenal effort that y'all are doing. Look right there, let them know, Tye.
So I would say go to houseourneighbors.org, get included in the volunteer list, in our newsletter, follow us on social media. That's just, to stay engaged. But our first listening session will be August 18th, 2 to 4 p.m. There's childcare, it's family friendly, there'll be food, there's always a food, it's at Washington Hall. Nikita Oliver helped us put it on, so of course there's always gonna be food at an event that they're throwing. So come out, listen, have your voice heard. If you're a skeptic, please come out, right? If you already support us, come out and see people you probably know. But if you're very confused, this is the first time you've heard of it, you might have heard of it and heard maybe something differently, we want to hear from that, right? Because we know people will not engage with something that they don't have a buy-in in, so we want to hear from folks.
Tye, this is phenomenal work. Thank you so much for coming. I mean, anything y'all want from me, tell me.
Okay.
Like, I love this work. If there are more updates, more opportunities, more listening posts, things like that, where you're hearing from something, from some of the community, you want to share out anything, please just know that Day with Trae is here for y'all.
Okay, thank you so much, Trae. Happy
Absolutely.
to be here.
Oh my gosh, y'all. What a phenomenal Tuesday. First of all, you can tell how much I love housing. And for those of you who have known me for some time, you know that that's where I really brought myself back into community was with Africatown Community Land Trust. So this work is so near and dear to my heart. And I'll be giving all of the love to my guests right after this short break. Stay tuned. You're watching The Day with Trae.
Hello, welcome to Elite Insights with Carlos Imani. We're looking to offer an in-depth look at event production industry through the lens of client experiences and joint successes. The podcast will emphasize guest interviews, focusing on client discussing their fields and reflecting on their collaboration with Elite Collective. Again, you're with Elite Insights. Carlos Imani here. I'll see you guys in a few.
The importance to share the history of the Buffalo Soldiers of Seattle and Buffalo Soldiers of everywhere, including cowboys and cowgirls of color everywhere, is really important because most likely they're forgotten. It's important that they're acknowledged, especially for girls like me who look up to them.
At a rodeo, it's got an impact on people when they see somebody doing something like that, especially a person of color, you know what I mean? It's got a big impact on people, I think.
Representing the Evergreen State, I am your Miss Teen Rodeo Washington, Jessa Thomas. Welcome to the Windswept Farm.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Day with Trae. I'm your host, Trae Holiday. I mean, y'all can see my eyes are doing all the lighting up because when we talk about housing, it does something different to me. I understand it as such a necessary facet of our communities. So I got to give a huge shout out to my guests today, Jeff Dade and, of course, Tye Reed, both of them showcasing how important it is to be engaged and involved when we're talking about building spaces that matter for us and what that looks like, whether it is a land trust model or social housing model. The idea is that we can incorporate different styles of housing to our landscape is so necessary and vital right now when we see the inaffordability of housing, not only in Seattle, but throughout Washington State and throughout the country. I mean, this is something that's plaguing so many different legacy communities when we think about how they're getting pushed out of their neighborhoods, the places that raised them, where they grew up, and now they can't have their children there. And I'm one of those people, right, where we had to learn more about Federal Way, and there's still so much I don't know because my history is in the CD. My roots are in that soil. And so I've never been able to feel like I could plant roots in the soil of Federal Way. And even though I'm a homeowner there, there's so much disconnect for me. So I really am so appreciative of folks who do this body of work and bring their passion, expertise, and love of community into it. Huge shout out to them. Please make sure that y'all are going to the websites for homesteadclt.org and check out House Our Neighbors and their social housing listening posts. Y'all get engaged, get involved. We need your voices there. We need you to be informed and understand all of the things that exist when it comes to the landscape of housing. Of course, y'all know I get to wrap this up today, but I'm back with you tomorrow. And until then, y'all, at 11 a.m. Peace. Converge Media produces culturally relevant content for Black and urban audiences. Our coverage is raw, transparent, and objective, praised by community leaders, government officials, and residents. Support Converge Media today via Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at Converge Media.